You should go up to Andy. You should go up to Holly. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. And before Dave chants the Haftarah for us, Jay Englander has some words by way of introduction to the Haftarah, including letting us know what page the Haftarah will be on for this Shabbat year.
I'll save that for last. Shabbat Shalom. Today's Haftarah for Vayakel, first Svardim, begins much as we might expect it to. We see the parallel between the building of the Mishkan in the Torah and the building of the temple in the Haftarah. God chooses Bezalel and Solomon Hiram, both humans of unique skill, ability, knowledge, and talent to build these holy objects. But then our Haftarah turns. It spends the rest of its time describing in great detail the construction of just 3 distinct objects that are held in such importance by the author of our text that each receives a distinct name. A pillar to the right, Yachin, a pillar to the left, Boaz, and a gigantic basin, Hamayim Mutzak. The pillars in particular take on a mythic significance, not just for Jews, but also for others, particularly the Freemasons, and they appear in scores of religious works. I will concentrate here, though, on how these objects are interpreted by our own mystical traditions, 2 different examples, and then finally I'd like to examine the place of objects in our tradition, particularly since in our Torah reading we spent so much time talking and in such detail about the construction of these objects. First, let's look at those names, Yachin and Boaz. The Radak in Malachim 1, 721 translates Yachin as establishment or endurance, and Boaz as inner strength, not the strength to push out, but the strength to submit. Boaz. These ideas are further expanded in the Zohar, where it states that Yachin and Boaz actually stand for 2 of the Sfirot, Netzach and Hod. These are 2 of the lower Sfirot. The Netzach v'Hod lakvelahu Yavin u'Boaz. The Zohar goes ahead and starts talking about suffering in Eicha. It actually refers to Eicha, a kind of suffering that makes us faint, Dava, and it leads to spiritual cleansing. And it connects this idea, this being able to deal with suffering and this cleansing of our souls to Netzach. And to the Sfira of Hod, it connects to the ideas of prayer, of the outgoing, but then also to submission. The Kabbalah, as you're probably aware, the different Sfirot are often connected to parts of the body. And Netzach and Hod are connected actually to the 2 legs of the body. And in this section, in Siman 121, it describes these 2 legs as legs that are supporting the synagogue, using actually a Spanish phrase that we see as referring to synagogue, Eish Naga. With these 2 legs, the bright fire is supported. Another interpretation of these objects comes from another mystical text, and they see these objects, these pillars in this basin, as referring to creation. The 2 pillars they think of them as being the 2 trees in Gan Eden. And in fact, when we read through the text, you'll see that it talks about the pomegranates on the capitals at the top. Surprise, they weren't apples in the Mideast. It was pomegranates that our tradition says that Chava. They see one of the trees, the tree of fertility. This is the tree of endurance, of eternity, the tree of life. The other tree, the tree of divine knowledge, the tree that connects to the knowledge of good and evil. And finally, the basin, this large basin, this molten basin. It's seen as being the waters from which God creates the world, which God makes the worlds come into being through his words. Well, you can see that these words that our forefathers, our ancestors, have spent a lot of time thinking about these objects. But I'd actually like to kind of step back a little bit and actually take a look at this from a different perspective. Not to go on to an ontological search to look for the intrinsic meaning of these objects, but rather to look at it from more of an existential perspective. The idea that the objects exist and that we provide essence, that we give meaning to those objects. I think that the reason why Hiram goes ahead and builds these objects is that he actually has an understanding that as human beings we feel separated from the divine, and that oftentimes we need things to help us to try to make those connections to the divine. Whether that's spiritual imagery, whether it's something like yoga, or whether it's an attempt to take objects and to use objects as a way to develop relationship. We are looking in our lives to develop relationships both with one another and with divine. I mean, we name our cars, we name our pets, and some of us even name our GPS voices. And in doing this, what we're doing is we're taking inanimate objects and we're using them to create relationship in our minds. In the desert, we demanded that God provide us pillars of cloud and pillars of fire as our way to connect. And just as with that, we demand from our ritual objects that they act as vessels for us to be able to take our feelings, our yearnings, and to put them in those as a way of helping us to make connection with the divine. I acknowledge the importance of objects, even things like our Torah, which is really just a piece of paper, but we use those as tools to help to direct us in our spiritual journey. But I want to remind us that we have to remember that while they're helpful and they provide a positive influence, that they are just objects, and that it's not the objects, but it's our strength, our inner strength, and our ability to endure that we embody into those objects and that give those objects meaning, and not the other way around. We read our Haftarah today beginning on page 576. Shabbat Shalom.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratza b'divrehem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah uv'Moshe avdo uv'Yisrael amo uv'nvi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek v'yishla